and ready when you are. Super duper.
What up, boys?
How you doing?
How's it going?
So, Mike, welcome back. Even though our audience hasn't heard from you yet, welcome back.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me back so soon.
Well, it's that last episode was so good.
Oh my gosh. So let me explain what happened just so everybody knows. And Nick is the technical wizard behind everything we do. So,
Failing wizard, obviously.
You know,
failing wizard.
You are, but he told me what happened, and that was simply that that we did have Mike on before, and unfortunately it did not record one of us, and that one would be me, apparently. Now, I would say that normally that would be a much better PoddiMouths episode if you couldn't hear me. However, apparently there were some dead spots where I was talking. So and we're actually going to recreate our episode.
We're going to do our best. Mike. But we were talking just before, we're testing a new method, which I think our listeners are getting used to because we are struggling. We're on the struggle bus, trying to get the audio just perfect so that you can hear us and enjoy us, and it doesn't sound like, you know, John is a robot or I'm lost in a deep dark pit somewhere. But I think, as I was saying to Mike, maybe the failure of our last podcast was kind of fortuitous because right after that I heard about the new diesel Jeep Wrangler, which really, really excites me. And then Mike said, yeah, but did you see the two-door Gladiator? So we've got a lot more to talk about Jeeps today than we had last time we tried to record the podcast. So Mike,
so no one knows that. No, we actually talked about Jeeps.
Right. Oh yeah, I just let that one slip in. Yeah. We did. No, I think in the when I replayed the classic episode, I did a little introduction to it, and I did mention that we were talking about Jeeps. So I think our listeners know. Yeah, teaser.
Right.
Yeah. So all that being said, Mike, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks, guys, for having me back. My name is Mike Osterlink. I worked with Jon at one time at General Motors University, if we can say the name of it, of course. And Jon and I have kind of kept in touch since we've both departed that ways from there. And currently, I am a process manager for a major title company in the United States here, and I get the privilege of working remotely from my house for this very large title company, which is an awesome thing. And I've been with them for almost 14 years now.
Awesome. And as you're about to find out, Mike and Nick share a freakish wantonness for Jeeps. I think wantonness is exactly the correct way to describe it.
That is a good way to describe it.
You went straight to the Ziggy calendar for that word.
I did.
He's got like 3 of them sitting on his desk.
I do. No, I'm actually a walking, talking, zany calendar. You know that.
I'm sorry, I missed the second part of that. I heard zany. Sorry, bad dad joke.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
So let's get started and talk a little bit. What's your background, Mike, when it comes to Jeep and those you've owned and those you want to own, maybe?
Sure. So our Jeep journey, I say it ours because mine and my wife, when we look at cars, we decide how to buy cars together. So, and she was in need of a vehicle that could, she really loved her convertible Sebring at the time, and we wanted to step her into another convertible vehicle. I said, well, I just really wish they made a convertible that could tow because I really want to get the boat down into the lake with this new vehicle. And so we looked around and I'm like, Jeep. I'm like, oh, there's convertible for her and towing for me. That's perfect. So we started out in a 2013 Wrangler. There was a JK 2-door Wrangler at the time. And it could tow and it could ride around in a convertible for her back and forth to work. So it was the perfect vehicle. We had that one for a couple of years, and as the family grew larger, not in size, well, in size, yes, but but not in numbers. We'll put it that way. Because I do have 2 kids, so we decided, okay, yeah, getting the kids back into the backseat of the Jeep can be kind of problematic. At that time, move on to a different vehicle anyway. So we ended up looking at 4-door Jeep instead. So our Wrangler grew in size itself because we traded in for a different 4-door Wrangler. And then that 4-door Wrangler, I actually got to take a little bit more control and do some mods on. And we'll talk about mods because mods are one of the biggest things, a very hot thing in the Jeep market. And there's always kind of new mod companies popping up all the time.
Yep.
So that 2000 and I'm sorry, that was I don't remember what year it was. Anyway, that Wrangler we took and we put a 2.5-inch lid on it, which included, coils and everything else, coils and shocks. And then I put some 37s underneath it as well. So we had a lifted and then bigger tires on the Jeep to make it more capable and make it a way better stance Sahara rims that it had on it. So, and then we took the front bumper off and we replaced that with it was a Poison Spider front bumper from a great company out in California that makes an aftermarket Poison Spider, and it had the bigger brawler bar on it. And I took and put a winch on that as well to make it a little bit more capable and get us out of those hairy, sticky situations. And we ended up going with some LED front headlights and light bars as well. We ended up making that thing pretty capable Jeep. I ended up actually even cutting the front fenders on it to give it a bigger, rakier look as well. So we've had lots of fun with the Jeeps, taking them over to the sand dunes in Michigan. Silver Lake Sand Dunes, a great spot to go play around in with a Jeep if it's modified or not. We've also taken it on quite a few other off-road adventures as well. So lots of fun in Jeeps.
So we were talking.
So
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that, it is interesting because there are a whole lot of people that buy Jeeps and even upfit them. And they don't ever take them off road. So it's interesting to me that you do that and have done that. That's awesome.
And that's kind of where I was going with that too, John, because in the last episode, and I'll probably say that like 20 different times during this, we actually got in the conversation about the fact that I am not a fan of lifting. And I kind of get panned for that because there are a lot of people that like to lift their Jeeps. But lifting just to lifting is where I get upset. And I honestly, the reason I say we talked about it the last time is because I don't think I was able to say that quite as clearly. I'm not against lifting if you lift it for the right reasons or if you do the lifting correctly.
And that's
go ahead.
That's a great point because there are several trails in United States area. They're actually Jeep badged trails.
Yep.
Where if you go to them, you can get a Jeep badge and everything for your Wrangler. But there are several trails in the United States that they do not recommend, and some off-road parks that will not let you in unless you have your Jeep lifted because they know the front clearance on the Jeep and hitting the front clearance on your Jeep could be a bad thing because the oil pan is so exposed on them. But yeah, so it's a great point because lifting it for the right reason is always best. And I have seen so many Jeeps parked in the mall that were lifted and should not have been lifted because of the tires they had on them as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Or my favorite are the ones that they're lifted and then they have these tiny little tires. I'm like, why? What is the purpose of that?
Ridiculous. Yeah, that's crazy. And so that's part of it too is people using them for capabilities and not. But you said the exposed oil pan can't you put on a skid plate?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of skid plates out there. But that's another thing. Like a lot of Jeep people, they don't want to add any extra weight to their Jeep as it is.
Right.
Yeah,
well, a skid plate doesn't amount to that much weight, especially aluminum ones.
Well, yeah, aluminum skid plate, but you're just going to slice right through that. Why go with aluminum? You're going to
carbon
fiber. You're going to have to go. Yeah, I don't even know if they do carbon fiber. Most of them are still steel, unless you add it yourself. But you can get like the sport versions or the Rubicons. They come. I think it's definitely the Rubicons come standard with steel skid plates.
Front and rear.
Front and rear. And going to the diesel, and because you were talking about weight, the interesting thing about the new diesel is because of the engine, it adds an extra 400 pounds to the Jeep.
Wow,
And
that's substantial.
yeah, it is substantial, and it has an extra skid plate because of the what's the D fluid?
The DEF.
DEF fluid.
Yeah, DF fluid. Yes.
Yep. So there's because of where that tank sits, which actually is behind or aft of the gas tank. They have another skid plate which adds even more weight to the vehicle. But because it's go ahead. Sorry.
If we're going to talk to diesel Jeeps, we got to talk about them cutting out part of the gas tank to allow for that DEF fluid as well.
Exactly, which is still strange because they're claiming, and it hasn't been approved yet, I guess, through the government. But they're also claiming that this thing can go 500 miles on a tank, even with the smaller gas tank, at 30 miles to the gallon, which I think is at 30, which I think is pretty incredible for a heavier Jeep and a Jeep in general. But the other thing that this one has that the other Jeeps don't, or the other Wranglers don't, is more torque. So even though it's heavier, a lot of these guys that I was watching that were reviewing it said it crawls better
at a lower range, at a lower RPM.
Yeah. They said I didn't even have to give it gas; it just crawled. It just went over everything. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. Again, for a heavier vehicle.
Well, and a lot heavier. I mean, that 400 pounds is nothing to sneeze at. If we're, Mike mentioned the skid plates, and so even a steel skid plate, front and rear, isn't going to be 100 pounds. I wouldn't think.
Yeah, they're saying that 375 of it is the engine, and the rest of the 50 or so pounds is other things that they had to put on for a diesel engine. So there you go.
And I'm still excited about it. I don't know about you guys. When I saw that, I knew that diesel Wranglers existed, but they existed in Europe. And I was always saying, I wish they would just bring it over to the States. So when they announced that, I'm like, I'm all over it. I know it's more expensive, it's heavier, but to be able to drive a Jeep that gets 30 miles to the gallon, sign me up.
So I've come across a couple of the diesel older Wranglers, and they were right-hand drives because they're from Europe. Mm-hmm. And they were brought over for a mining company, I believe, in Pennsylvania or something like that. And I actually heard one run, and that right there kind of turned me off a little bit. Hearing the loudness, but the sourness of that style of Wrangler just didn't turn me on, for that type of a diesel Wrangler. Now, so that's why I'm very interested to hear what the newer one sounds like, because it's a totally different engine than what they've put in the past.
It is. And so I don't remember the names. I could look it up, but then I'd probably mess up our recording at some point.
Let's not do that again.
But the people that I was watching on YouTube that were reviewing the Jeeps, they had the same concern. And when they drove the Jeep, they said with the windows shut, they have added sound deadening, so it sounds like a regular Jeep. And they were recording while they were driving down the highway and when they were rock crawling, and they were just talking normally, and you could hear them. So that from that standpoint, it's actually really, really good. But they did, two of the three that I watched did say when you roll down the window, it does have a different sound. You can hear the diesel. So no one took the top off, so I don't know what it would sound like with the top off. That was the one thing I was kind of hoping someone would do and kind of give us an idea of that. But even at that, if you're going down the freeway and your windows are open or you've got the top off, you're going to have so much wind noise anyways. Will you really hear the engine? That's kind of my take on it, especially if you close all the windows and you can't hear it. It's got to be quieter.
That's the thing too. It's not dissimilar to riding a motorcycle in the wind. People say, "Well, I don't wear a helmet because I want to be able to hear better." Well, when you're driving 70 or riding 70 down the road, you can't hear anything for the wind whipping anyway. But I tell you what, I have, and maybe this will pass on your Jeep driving. I start wearing earplugs now, and it makes a huge difference.
Well, yeah, especially when you're riding a Harley. I mean, I'm sorry, they're just so loud.
Oh, they are
so
nuts.
loud.
There's a sticker I have, or it's like a patch that I have on my vest that I never wear, because if you own a Harley, you have to have a vest. And it says "Loud pipes save lives."
Well, I mean, that's not false. That is very, very true. You know when there's a motorcycle coming if it's a Harley usually. But when you're driving down the road and your windows are up and your 9-year-old daughter's in the back seat and she has to cover her ears when a motorcycle passes, that's a little bit too loud.
Some are ridiculous. I will grant you that. But what I've also witnessed being on it is the importance of razzing it from time to time when you have someone you suspect does not know you're there. Because it happens quite often.
Oh, absolutely. I'm never going to argue that point. That's a very, very good point.
Well, it is, but it's again, you're right. It's sometimes they're just overly loud and they're straight pipes or whatever, and you don't need. I mean, that may be overkill.
Yeah. Well, and bringing it back to the conversation, there are some people that lift their Jeeps, and then it's not just Jeeps either. I saw a truck do this yesterday, and it kind of pissed me off. Right outside of my daughter's school, the school itself is next to a freeway, but the road up to it goes under the freeway, and there's a little overpass. Someone with a stupid lifted truck, and I mean stupid there's no functional reason for this truck to be lifted. The small tires with the really loud exhaust.
Yeah,
goes under the bridge and decides to
razz it.
And I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? I know you're doing it because you think it sounds good, but you're making the rest of us cringe and almost get into an accident because, we're trying to avoid you.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens sometimes too. And now we're turning this into, hey, let's have a Jeep conversation. Do you know what those stupid kids do today?
Oh, I know.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it's going. But I have to tell you, and this may be just a local thing to us or a Wisconsin thing, there are a lot of younger testosterone-laden dudes that are driving these lifted diesel trucks, and they have the massive. Some of them have the semi-like smokestacks
coming out of the bed.
Yes, and they will regularly roll coal.
Yeah, that's not limited to Wisconsin, my friend.
No, I figured as much, especially since you're in Tennessee.
Yeah. You know who's even worse? I love you, anyone who lives in Alabama, but the people in Alabama have more of this. I've seen more in Alabama than anywhere else.
Have you?
Yep.
It's a little
over
the top. But hey, whatever. I don't think it's any worse though than the the 4,000 watt stereos that people have in their vehicles that are thumping as you pull up next to them.
Right.
And the Beatles, Beatles are terrible. I can't believe those crazy musics that they make.
Right.
Sorry.
But what's really cool is when you get those really massive stereos like that in the back of a Jeep Wrangler. But that's mostly for tailgating.
I do. Yes, it
would
be because I don't mind telling you, it's probably not great acoustics in the back.
No.
Even with a hard top.
So when we talk about lifted and we talk about the bigger tires, I do have to say I've had 2 Jeeps. Both of them were the TJ version, and the first one was a 97, which was the first year that the TJ came out. And the TJ was the return to the round lights. So you had the CJs, which had round lights, and then they went to the YJ, and the YJ had those square lights.
Yeah. So here's a quick trivia question about that. What year did the YJ come out with the square headlights?
1987.
87 is correct, and replaced by the round headlighted Wrangler TJ in
1997.
96. Really
96.
Well, the model year was 97 though, because Jeep up until the JK started everything on the 7s.
I assume you're blah 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 blah. They're just talking about. I'm looking at this forum, and it's talking about. It does say 96, but it doesn't matter. It says in 1996.
In 1996, model year 97.
97 model year.
Yep. Fine. Well, and for those people that aren't familiar with cars, we usually release the next model year in the previous year, if that makes sense.
When you say we, I know Nick is actually speaking like the auto industry.
Exactly. So if you're buying a 2020, you have a good chance of buying that 2020 in 2019.
Almost a better chance of buying it in 2020 than buying it in 2020.
Probably, because in 2020, you're probably buying a 2021.
I think the Wranglers have always been late on that schedule, though, haven't they?
They have. Yes, they have. And that's probably why they, especially with the JK, because the JK, they actually rolled that out in 2006 to try to beat that, which is weird because you'd think it'd be 2007, but I think they rolled out, I don't think they rolled out the 2006s in 2005. I think they actually rolled it out in 2006.
So can we agree, though, that the round headlights are better?
100%.
I totally agree.
Cooler.
Yes, but the square headlights, there's nothing wrong with those. The Jeeps, those YJs,
it just
they
didn't
run
seem
well.
like
It's the same
it just
engine.
changed the look. You know, when you look at vehicles, any vehicle though, it's whether we like the way it looks or not, it's always the face of the vehicle.
It is, yeah.
And you have that visual of Jeeps since the 40s, you know, and it just changed it completely. And you kind of go, oh, this is pretty 70s or 80s looking.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I had two of the TJs, and the first one was 97. The last one was a 2006. And the 2006 version, I actually inherited from my mom after she passed away. She wanted a Jeep so bad because of my first Jeep. She got it, and she got it with the big mudding tires on it. And so she had all 5 tires, and we'll talk about the 5-tire rotation here in a minute too. We didn't talk about that on the last episode.
No.
But all 5 tires were these big round tires. But the dealership that put them on didn't lift it. They didn't even put a small lift. They didn't lift it, and they didn't add any new shock absorbers to hold the back end up because there was so much weight on the back end that it squatted. Then the last thing they didn't do, because the tires were oversized, is they didn't change the speedometer to adapt to those oversized tires, which a lot of people do forget. So when I was driving it, and I didn't realize this until several years after she had gotten it and I had inherited it, that I was going about 5 miles an hour faster than I was supposed to be going. So if I was going 60, I was actually going 65.
And everyone's got a ticket for it.
Very lucky I never got a ticket for it. But yeah,
right.
It was kind of scary. I could have easily. Easily. So it's things like that. And that was a dealership that did that. And that's what annoyed me. It was a new car dealer that didn't put the right equipment on this Jeep to make it.
But you know why the motivation for, and this is not all dealers, this is some dealers. Suddenly it's a huge profit opportunity for them.
Well, it is, because they're putting, and these were all Jeep parts, so they were putting is it Mopar for Chrysler?
For Chrysler, yeah.
So they were putting the Mopar parts on there, so they were getting money from the manufacturer to put these parts on there, and they were getting money from the purchase of the sale, but they just didn't do it right because they were trying to save more money, because lifting it is not cheap.
No, it's definitely not, and it's not just wheels and tires,
right?
Well, and especially with the lift, and sometimes it's a lot more. We talked a little bit about this, Mike, before, but talk about it. Was there anything else that you did just besides the lift kit, or was there any linkage differences, or how does that work?
Usually with the lift kits, they sell you the brake line extenders.
Oh yeah.
As well. And then the linkage, they sell you all the parts for these different lift kits to actually be able to put all that on correctly. Luckily, the linkage didn't change too much with a 2.5-inch lift. Now, if you go 3-inch and bigger, that's when things started changing big time on the JK, and then that's where the big money comes in as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of those aftermarket parts, the whole speedometer thing, I was surprised they didn't put a way to edit what tire size you have on the new JL. I thought that was a thing that they kind of missed. You still have to buy an aftermarket programmer to change your tire size on the JL,
Right.
To change your speedometer, obviously, is what that is. And it makes you wonder, how off is your mileage at that point, too?
Very true. Yeah, and especially if we go back to talking about the new diesels and their mileage. If you start actually customizing your Jeep, what is that going to do to that gas mileage? And I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that a lot of these guys in these videos brought up had nothing necessarily to do with the diesel per se, but they were talking about the size of the tires, the standard size of the tires. Mm-hmm. I remember, I think, if I remember correctly, my first Jeep, the standard tire size was 23 inches, I think. That sounds really small, though, doesn't it?
That sounds small, yeah.
That sounds small. So maybe it was bigger than that. But the new tires are probably, I think, man, and I'm getting the numbers wrong. I know, but they're 37s.
They're 37s on the new ones?
The new ones are 37s standard.
Wow.
Yeah, they're huge compared to what they were on not even the previous generation, but the generation before that. Just standard. And I think that's incredible that the Jeeps are getting so big and so robust. And then there's still I think that was the point of the person doing the report, was the fact that people are still going in and putting bigger tires on. You've already got 37s. I thought that was crazy. But I agree with you.
Well, and again, those are the people who are not going off-road typically either. It's just for, and that's, a lot of people did that with Hummers as well. You know, they would do these massive upfits, $100,000+ for some of them. And, they never took them off-road.
Right.
They had no intention of taking them off-road.
And I will admit, and that's probably why I didn't modify my Jeeps very much, was I didn't really take them off-road. That was not my style. I was on-road, and I drove a lot, so I wanted better gas mileage, so I had smaller tires, and I didn't have a lot of extra weight. And so I was kind of doing the opposite, I guess, Mike, of you, because you were taking it off-road, right? You were taking it to the dunes and things like that.
Like I said, I had the advantage of working from home, so my vehicle kind of sits unless there's, a use for it. It's not a daily driver kind of thing. So, we took plenty of trips with the Jeep, and it's been lots of fun. In fact, the reason we had to sell that Jeep is because we moved to Ohio, and I didn't want to drive it back and forth between Ohio and Michigan all the time. So,
yeah. My first one, I went to college. I did my undergrad in St. Louis, and we lived in Minneapolis, and it did not have cruise control, and it was a soft top. And I would go probably every 2, maybe 3 weeks, go home. And it's a nice 10-hour drive.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, in a Jeep without cruise control. So I would jam my foot between the pedal and the sidewall. There's a sidewall? I don't even remember what it's called. But yeah, I would jam my foot in there and just hope that I would maintain speed and not fall asleep, which it was hard to fall asleep when you've got the flap, 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 flap going for 10 hours.
Wow. That's nice.
And those mud trains, they can make a lot of noise.
Oh yeah. So the second Jeep, when I was driving it down to Nashville from Minneapolis with those mud trains on, it was noisy, and that had a hard top. It was still extremely noisy.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely worth it though. So
for sure.
One thing that's a little bit upsetting, I guess, not for my wife, because she would absolutely love this. She doesn't know how to drive a manual transmission, but the diesels are only coming with a automatic transmission.
I did see that note, and I was kind of taken aback by that, because most of the diesel, in fact, all the diesel Wranglers I've seen, including people who have taken their older Wrangler and retrofitted a diesel into it, have all been manual transmissions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so going backwards, from that point, I guess Jeep has their reasons of why they did it. But it's very interesting to see that only comes in an automatic for right now.
I think that's a good point too for right now. I'm sure they'll probably come out with a manual, but just introducing something new, and it's not radical, but it's fairly radical for a Wrangler, from a Wrangler standpoint, to introduce something like this to the American market. I'm sure they're being very careful. Jeep is very good about being very careful, except for, and I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. except for the JKs.
The JKs, yeah. Okay, so JKs was also the most popular version of the Jeep ever,
which I find very fascinating because, in my opinion, it is the ugliest. I think personally, and I apologize, sort of, I think the JKs, just kidding, are uglier than the YJs.
Oh, I don't know if I'd go that far. Yeah, each person has their own opinion on that one. I honestly have always, I hated the four-door Wrangler when it came out on the JK version.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I hated it. I said, that is not a Jeep. Why is it? And then
agree with you 100%.
It grew on me though, like big time. Then all of a sudden, after owning a two-door for a while and then moving to the four-door, that thing really grew on me. And I think that was probably one of my most favorite vehicles I've ever owned is that four-door Wrangler. It's just, but yes, some people love the older Jeeps, and some people most of the people I know have owned a JK unless they're going a rock bouncer type Jeep. Then they move obviously away from the JK.
Right. Well,
Nick, explain for these stupid people like me who don't know the difference between the JK. I mean, I'm looking at it and it's new. It looks newer and a little more stylish, maybe. But it doesn't look like a Liberty to me.
No, it doesn't look like a Liberty. But it was I think for me, it was just such a departure from what Jeep has looked like for so long, including the YJs, even with the square lights, a very small, compact body. It was always a compact vehicle, all the way back to when it was a Willys. And with the JKs, it just got almost twice the size of a regular Jeep Wrangler. Even the two-door version was a lot wider, bigger wheelbase. It just got big, and there was a lot of technology put in there, which we talked about this before, and we actually talked about it in the last episode too. One of the reasons I think they changed everything like they did was not just because they wanted a drastic change, but also because of government regulations and trying to make sure that the engine met all of the guidelines and safety and stuff like that. So there's probably a very good reason why they got bigger. But the fact that it got bigger just kind of hit a lot of traditional Jeep people, I think, the wrong way. That being said, I agree with you, Mike. When they first came out with that four-door version, I was 100% against it. And now that the new JLs have come out, I love them. That would be what I would buy. I would buy a four-door. I would not buy a two-door. I think they look really, really good.
I'm in the same boat right there. Melissa's lease ends next year, my wife Melissa, and that will probably be the next vehicle that we own is another Jeep, but it will be a JL this time. I haven't decided on the engine version that we're going to get yet, but I'm almost we've only owned Saharas at this point, so I'm going back, and I think we're going to go back to another Sahara just because she loves the convenience features that comes with it, heated seats, heated steering wheel. The possibility of we didn't talk about this last time, the possibility of the retracting roof on is quite the option, but it's quite the price of an option, but that option is still out there for the Sahara Jeeps.
And before I sorry to interrupt, but I got to point something out too because of John's question. That's the other part that always bothered me, but now that I've gotten older, I'm actually looking forward to, especially with the JLs. When you're talking about a Jeep, it's supposed to be an off-road vehicle, very basic, very get in, do the work. And now they've got a massive touchscreen. They've got heated seats, heated steering wheels, automatic top. It's becoming less of and I think that's also why the JKs got so popular is because of all the technology in it. It became a regular vehicle, not a weekender. Putts, go off road, do stuff like that, and I think that was also my initial problem with it, but is also what is attracting me to the new one as well. I apologize. I just had to throw that in there.
No, I totally agree with that because the Jeep was always geared toward the minimalist person, and that was always the line that they followed. And I don't know if it was because of the technology or what it actually was, but they've won so many awards for being the best selling vehicle, the JK and now the JL as well.
Oh yeah.
And it's just they can't keep them on dealer lots. The markups and everything else that come with those Jeeps, the markups on the JL, the Gladiator right now are just
astronomical compared.
Wow,
and
I could
people
not
will pay
believe it.
There are really very few incentives, if any, on any of these vehicles.
Yes.
And the best part is they hold their value.
The value hold is just, and that's been another thing. Like, anytime you talk to these car dealers and you want to go in and you're upside down on a different vehicle, buy a Wrangler, because you're not going to be upside down for long.
Yeah, and it flies directly in the face of what we were talking about with leases, John. You want to get from under a car and you don't want to get into a lease, buy a Wrangler.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because for whatever reason, whether it's the captive lenders or whomever, when leases do not reflect a high resale value on the Jeeps, unfortunately.
They don't.
And so, but if it's a purchase, and they do, and a Jeep is one of those vehicles that I would never lease, because I want to customize it.
Right.
I want to make it mine. And I think that's one of the big attractions to Jeeps, that if you're going to put a lift kit and some 35s on or whatever, you're never going to get that back when you turn in the lease vehicle. And so I just think that's probably reflective of that they don't lease many of them for that reason. People don't.
Yeah. And I also think for me, and it's probably because of my love for Jeeps, everything we've talked about on all of our episodes, when we talk about leasing and buying, and the last episode, not the last one, but one of the episodes we were talking about the 7-year loan.
Yeah.
I would never in any situation ever tell someone they should do that. I would stay as far away from that as possible.
Yes.
I would break that for a Jeep. I wouldn't care, because I know I'd have it for more than 7 years.
Well, and that's you. And I think, the average person who's new to the Jeep family, and there are a lot of them, from the JK to the JLs, because it is more of a mass market target these days, it seems like. And they're trying to sell more. I get it. I think the Liberty is a cop-out. I mean, I really do. I think that's just...
Not as much as the Renegade.
Yeah, or yes. So I just think I long for the days of the old Cherokee that was a box with wheels.
I loved the Cherokee.
They were great. We had one, excuse me, they had some transmission issues, and that was pretty consistent. We had a Cherokee and then a Grand Cherokee, and both of them had transmission problems.
Right.
I'm sure it was just a coincidence, John. But anyway, that said, I wish those vehicles were still around. So I get the nostalgia piece of it, especially for you, Nick, with the 2-door and off-roading capacity. And they just, they feed from your memories. And I totally get that. I just think that, I'm looking at a picture of the JL in the Rubicon that's lifted, and it's a good looking vehicle. And so, whether it's minimalist inside or not, you can't see from the road. So
right. True.
I would, it really depends what sort of stuff is important to you in the vehicle.
Right.
If you're an off-roader, a touchscreen probably is not going to be a big thing.
Let's talk about that, because from what I saw last, they were talking about retrofitting the 12-inch touchscreen from the Ram into the Wrangler.
Yes.
Have you seen those 12-inch touchscreens?
Yes. Yes.
They're huge.
They're massive.
Yes. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, really?
Well, they're just going to put it in instead of the windshield.
Well, and to be fair, a lot of people that do, let's say, overlanding, a lot of people, and overlanding, for those people, the people that don't know, is when you retrofit your vehicle to be able to go somewhere and camp. So it might have a tent on the top. Yeah. You can pull out cook gear and stuff like that. It's. You think you can do that with any vehicle? No, an overlander is someone who has built this vehicle to take off road to camp. But when you see a lot of those people, or people that do rock climbing or just take it in the mountains, they have all of these screens, iPads and different other screens that they do to measure the tire inflation and all of this equipment that's separate from the vehicle. I think Jeep now, because I know with some of them you can actually change your tire pressure right from the console. So I think too with these big screens, they're trying to help, not necessarily help, but probably trying to put their technology in so people don't go and add all of these other pieces of technology instead.
Or just attracting those people.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get to.
Face it.
You said that.
No,
much
you're
better than I
right.
did.
And I think it's all a profitability opportunity. When you look at these online, and there are companies, of course, that do nothing but upfit Jeeps, and they, maybe start out at 50 or 60 and go up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars,
200.
depending upon how they do it. Yeah, hundreds. I said S.
I know. I had to get it up there.
No, 200. You're like 600. Yeah, I'm still right. Boy, it's awesome having you on, Mike.
Mike, if you haven't learned one thing, you just know that everything we say, John's right.
And that's all that matters. I just hang up. Otherwise, Nick says, "John, I think I'm right." Click. I'm gone.
No,
but yeah, you're right. I mean, they're just so expensive, and it's just phenomenal how much I guess available capital people have, liquid capital.
Unbelievable.
But then again, I've looked at the Super C Renegade RVs, Nick.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, $400,000 to $600,000 typically.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So the camping thing is a cool application to that.
And speaking of those price tags, the biggest price tag that I've seen on these Jeeps is because they're retrofitting the Hemi engines in them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And that's just, we talked about this in the last episode, but it's worth bringing back up because I just saw a JL that they already stuffed the Hemi into that was out at the SEMA auto convention out in Las Vegas last week or 2 weeks ago. And these companies, like there was this company in Michigan that I lived right down the street from, and that's what that's what they specialize in.
Wow.
They developed kits to make for these conversions for these crate engines to put the Hemi engine, all the way from the 5.7 all the way up to the 6.4s and turbocharged, dual turbocharged 6.4s into these Jeeps, stuffing them under the hood. There is literally no room under those hoods after they're done with them.
Well, and the people that are doing that are probably just building them for the dream cruise,
Oh, right. I hope not, but yes, I totally agree.
Most of them are just taking them down Woodward. They're not taking them off road.
Well, now what's that? The engine we were talking about? I think it's a Hemi, but it's also the
Hellcat. Is
it the Hellcat? Yeah. They're putting some in. That just scares me.
If my mom is listening, it's the Heck Cat.
Heck Cat. Yeah, there you go. That's for the Peyton's fans too.
Yes.
That just scares me. Even with the older Jeeps, you get back into the CJs where they put the 350s in. That just scares the crap out of me because you get into one of those things, and especially with those older Jeeps, they're so much lighter, and you put that massive engine in there. I mean, that's just a disaster waiting to happen, and people love to do it. And again, going back to the modifications, I like my bulletproof straight 4. Give me a bulletproof straight 4 any day, the 4.0s. Why mess with perfection there? That's just my opinion again, and I'm full of them, so ask me anything.
You're full of something.
Yeah, that's true.
They had to mess with them for gas mileage. It's the only reason why they had to.
Right, exactly. Honestly. Yeah, yep. Back to that government intervention, they went, to the 3.6 or the 3.7?
Both. They went 3.7 first, and now they're at then they went 3.6 after that, right?
Yeah, something like that.
They had problems. We had a problem with our 3.7 and our two-door Jeep. It blew a valve spring, and I guess it was a really common issue for those 3.7s, even though I do know someone who has a 3.7 up to 300,000 miles right now.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're right. It's about the gas mileage and it's about regulations and things like that. But the conspiracy theory, there's always a conspiracy theory, is that Jeep made such a good engine and it was so bulletproof with that 4.0 that people weren't buying new Jeeps. So they went to the 3.7 and then to the 3.6 because they knew the engine would fail and someone would go out and buy another Jeep.
Oh, yeah. A good conspiracy theory.
That is a good conspiracy
Planned
theory.
obsolescence.
Yes.
Right. And what's the new? They're putting a different 3.
Yeah, they actually have 2 of them. So they're coming out with 3 engines now that you can have, and which is not unusual because they had the straight 6, and then they went to a 4-cylinder, which I don't know why you would. Anyone that has one, I apologize ahead of time. I'm sure it's a lovely vehicle, but why would you buy a 4-cylinder Jeep?
I'm sure it's a lovely vehicle.
I mean, it's the same car. It's just got a smaller engine, which with the lighter vehicle or the lighter Jeeps probably works just fine. It's when you get heavier though, and you start adding things, and then it's a dog. But so they've always had that, but now the new one. So they've got the 6-cylinder, and then they've got the 6 turbo, and now they have the diesel. So they have a turbo
and the
version.
Hemi.
And the Hemi, and the Hemi.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're going to be offering that.
Yeah, that's always been discussed, but never offered.
Yes.
Every year they start talking about it again. Whenever they go out into their Easter Jeep Safari around Easter time every year, and every year it's talked about, but it's I haven't seen it yet. And they got these engines, these crate Hellcat engines. The price on them is awful as it is. Then you have to pay almost the same price that costs the crate engine for someone to put it in.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's got to end up being about $100,000 vehicle, even if you don't do a whole bunch of other stuff
that's
to it.
Before you modify it even further.
Well, the engine's got to be 20 to 25, I would think. Right, Mike?
I'm looking right now because there's a place in
because you're thinking of putting one in your
JL
truck.
No, that will never happen. Actually, I've got a Hemi in my Charger, and it's fast. It's too fast for a Jeep. We were talking about that. It's fast for a Jeep. So I'm looking at this company in Texas called Starwood Motors. It's in Dallas, Texas, and they specialize in all these Jeep customizations and stuff. And actually, they don't have a Hemi on their lot right now, but 120 is usually what they are, brand new, with the Hemi conversion already done.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right, actually. And I'm sure there are several other ads, besides just the engine and labor and everything. I'm sure there are exterior.
Yeah, because to stuff these things in there, they have to take the body off the frame.
I'm sure, yeah.
And then put the frame and the engine and transmission.
You probably have to take the body off the frame to check the oil. They're all funny cars.
My wife always said it was the Lego of vehicles.
That's actually a really good description of a Jeep. That's it is. I like that. I like that a lot. That's wow.
That's pretty darn accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, if we had one in the driveway, I'm pretty certain my son would say I could build that with Legos.
Yep.
Well, and so you make a good point there, John, too. One of the other things when you go up from years to years, you go from the CJs to the YJs and so on. The level of difficulty when fixing is also another reason a lot of people push so hard against the newer Jeeps. And that's even to the TJs. Even the TJs were so advanced that you really couldn't putz on it yourself. Sure. So I think that's also something with the newer Jeeps that a lot of traditionally Jeep-focused people still have a problem with, is they can't just take it into the backyard, pop open the hood, and work on it.
And I think that's with anything too, especially when you look at, cars from the muscle cars and whatnot, the guys that put them together, would just shake their heads at today's cars because they want to wrench their own.
Yep. But that's always been something because Jeeps are so simple. They're Legos. I love that description. I think that's
it really is pretty good.
It's perfect. So before we go, because we're running to the end here, John, in the last episode that everyone missed out on, but it was really good for us. You had some trivia questions about the different Jeeps, and you had asked us, I think, what year the first one came out and so on and so forth. We won't get into that, but I have trivia question for you.
Oh, and
Well,
you
two.
know I'm not a Jeep guy, so go ahead.
Exactly.
That's fine. I'm
So-
going to make up the answer.
We didn't talk about it, but the very first Jeep I ever drove was a 1978 CJ7.
Okay.
There was the CJ5 and the CJ7, and they actually were produced at the same time. Not exactly at the same time, but they did cross over.
Mm-hmm.
What is, and Mike, you can answer this too. I know you already know the answer, but what was one of the biggest differences between the two, or not the biggest difference, because that's actually a false question. How could you, just looking at the profile of that Jeep, tell the difference between a CJ5 and a CJ7?
Yeah. You answered this before.
I did.
Mike, you know. So give one, Mike, if you know it.
It's the door shape.
Yep.
And the door shape goes over the rear tire.
Yes, exactly. Now,
What else?
well, here's the reason I asked that, John, because one of the trivia questions you gave us was the designation or the name that they gave the first civilian Jeep, which I incorrectly said was the Willie. And then you came back. I don't remember what you came back with, what the name was.
I'm sure it was. It doesn't matter because I was right.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to take that one thing further because I did do a little research after that. Two questions, and I'm going to roll it into one, but why did they start using the 2-letter moniker for every model of Jeep? And then the second part of that is, what does the moniker CJ actually stand for?
Civilian Jeep.
You looked it up, didn't you?
No, I just knew that off the top of my head.
Okay, well, that answers both of them. That's why they came with the 2-letter moniker, was because it came out civilian Jeep, and CJ was the first. Yeah.
Yes.
Good job, John. I'm so proud of you.
And people are going to think that you fed me that, but I actually just read it a second ago.
Exactly. I've just fed you bagels.
I look like you fed me bagels too. Thanks a lot. Hey, this is interesting. The CJ5 was never actually manufactured with auto transmissions.
Correct. Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
That is a difference between the 5 and the 7.
And so, yeah, it's a big difference. And the 7 too was the very first Jeep I drove, but it was also an automatic, and which I guess I had one other automatic, and then the rest that I ever drove beyond that were manual transmissions. So I'm partial to the manual, but
you prefer the manual.
I
prefer
that's what
the
manual.
Thought.
Yeah.
But Mike, having gone off road, Mike, do you have a preference, automatic or manual?
Depends on what I'm doing. Like daily driver, no way, it's automatic. But,
yeah, definitely automatic.
But, off-roading, there's a thin line you got to cross. Having to maneuver the clutch, the brake, the gas is a challenge, and it's a very welcome challenge for some people.
Sure.
Other people hate it. And other people take it even further, and they have these overbuilt Jeeps with these centrifugal clutches and everything else that's in them. And those are just amazing to see because, they don't touch the clutch.
Yeah.
It's just awesome how they can drive those Jeeps.
Yeah, that would be cool. And I've seen some like that. And frankly, I did some work for Hummer when they were out. And so I was on their off-road trail or off-road track in South Bend or wherever the heck it was. It was near South Bend, Indiana. But they were pretty amazing off-road. I mean, they were absolutely amazing off-road. But when you have to trust the transmission no matter what, whether it's, a manual or an automatic, to slow you down. Because off-road, it's not about braking. It's about letting the transmission do the work.
Yeah, you'll overheat your brakes and fry those things up real quick.
Yeah, in no time, exactly.
Brakes for that, yeah. So the transmissions they put in them are pretty beefy now. And honestly, I never had a problem with my transmission. I've seen other people have problems with their transmissions, but they were also taking 40-inch tires on a standard 3.6 rear end, and they had problems.
What a shock! Yes. Oh my gosh, that. So you know what? I don't know if I think we did better than the first recording that we attempted.
I think so too. I think that one was just
better.
a practice.
Good.
I think it was. It was like a rehearsal, Jeep rehearsal.
I think the only difference is in the last one, I wasn't so angry.
we like you when you're angry, unlike David Banner.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's a whole other episode because I would love to unpack the Avengers Endgame someday.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Oh my gosh. My daughter is so into those movies. I'm like still in shock that she's this much into Marvel and how much Marvel trivia she knows. But it's just, oh my. So I've seen the movies. I saw Endgame probably 4 times in the theater.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we also saw a couple times at home. So yeah, I will definitely help out with that if you guys want to.
Okay, well, we'll have you back for that because there's 2 things out of that I really want to dive into. One, obviously, the Marvel stuff, the Endgame. How old is your daughter?
13.
13, okay. And mine's 9 and just starting to get into it a lot more. I mean, she's seen a lot of the superhero movies, but we pick and choose because we don't want her to, anyway. That's a whole other episode. And then also what I would find interesting is I think I may have mentioned this before. I know John knows this, but when I first went to college, my career path was actually to be a filmmaker. So I went to school to be a filmmaker. And even with that background, I still love film to death. I don't go to the theater very often. So I didn't see Endgame in the theater. I haven't seen any of the Marvel movies in a theater.
Oh, yeah. I've got a 13-year-old and a 11-year-old, and they just they make theater going a lot.
Oh, that's interesting. That's one of the reasons we don't is because of my daughter. So that I would love to unpack that. I think that will be not the next episode, but definitely a future episode.
Okay,
all right,
for sure.
And that being
Mike,
said,
you rocked it. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Is there any social media network that you would love for people to follow you on, or you have any favorites that you want to suggest?
Instagram handle. Hang on.
Okay.
Find my Instagram handle.
Oh, you can tell how old we're getting.
I gotta find my Instagram.
Hold on,
handle.
let me find my Instagram handle.
Right.
Hang on, let me see if I can get my walker.
John, what's our Instagram handle?
Oh,
is that Mouse Potty?
No, that one's Twitter.
Dang it, it's PoddiMouths.
PoddiMouths at PoddiMouths.
And what?
Eat, drink.
Oh, eat
road.
dot drink dot road.
Correct. What's our Facebook?
And listen to him. Go ahead, Mike.
My Instagram handle is just Osterlink. Osterlink.
Very nice. I think I made another mistake and I was trying to be very careful when I did my introduction to the introduction to the last classic episode. I think I called you Osterman. I apologize.
Really?
I did. Yeah. I don't know why I said that, but it's been bothering me.
You should change your name to that, Mike. I kind of like Osterman.
There's already Ostermans out there.
There is, and I think I knew a few when I was growing up, and that's probably why I switched that in my brain when I said it.
Well,
so
you could be the next evolution of Ostermans because you're the next link.
Well, there's only technically 3 Osterlink males in the world. So
really.
Yeah.
What?
Another episode. We are just stacking up our episodes this week.
Yeah, because my grandfather never had any male offspring.
Okay.
He had 4 daughters, and his grandfather before that only had him and another son who didn't have any children. And so it's just been kind of trickling along. And because my grandpa only had 4 daughters himself, my mom wasn't married when I was born, so I became an Osterlink. So by chance, I'm the only Osterlink male offspring.
Interesting.
So what's particularly interesting about that, it's like you're controlling the Osterlink market.
Yes, exactly. It's a very controlling. That's why my Gmail address is just my last name at gmail.com. I don't have to put anything special on it.
No, why would you?
Yeah.
Right.
You need to buy up that URL quick.
I was thinking about that too. Thinking about doing that.
You should.
I think that's a really good idea. And Osterlink, frankly, sounds to me like a big cat.
I was going to say it just sounds like a really good corporation name. But, Big Cat's good too. Yeah.
Osterlink Inc. I kind of like how that rolls off your tongue.
You wouldn't even need to put the ink in there. You just say Osterlink.
Right.
Who do you work for?
LINC.
Osterlink.
You'd have to change the spelling. Yeah.
That's another interesting story because when I looked up our genealogy and looking at the records from Ellis Island, they changed the spelling of our last name when my great grandfather came to Ellis Island, because it was Osterllinck.
Oh,
wow.
So
Yeah.
it's like Dutch.
Yes, it's Belgian. Yeah.
Okay, close.
Yep.
Very close. Very close.
That's awesome.
Again, another episode because I have a very similar story.
We have several
We do.
upcoming Osterlink episodes.
Yeah, well, and it's not
Anytime,
quite
guys.
as drastic as the Osterlink line, but I am technically the last cubic in my line too. So
Really?
yeah, I am, and so that again, I think it'd be another fantastic episode. What do you guys think? Let us know on our social media accounts. Hit us up on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Definitely hit us up on Twitter. I think I shared that story about Erin, who actually did follow through and hit us up, and I didn't get back to her for like 3 days. I was a horrible twit. I was a horrible twit. Anyway.
That's scary.
You can find all of our social media networks by going to our website at PoddiMouths.com. You can also listen to our latest and greatest episodes there and all of our previous episodes right from the website, or you can choose to listen on your favorite podcasting network. What are you laughing at?
The latest and greatest episodes, or our other ones.
This is the
We
latest
have the
and
crappy
greatest.
ones out there too. You're just gonna
There
have to
are,
weed
well,
through them.
Anyone that you self-hosted, John, I'm sure, because you're always right?
Oh gosh, it's killing me.
Yeah. And our next episode, John, we talk all about the holidays. We talk about Thanksgiving coming up, which is in 2 weeks. And
Tryptophan. You will fall asleep
Tryptophan.
during that one.
Yeah, we are our own turkeys. Anyway, listen here, turkey. John, you wouldn't get that reference because you still haven't watched The Goonies. Anyway, folks.
I don't want to.
I know, but there's also a Jeep in The Goonies, too.
Fine.
And it's your
another
favorite
episode.
kind of Jeep.
Fine. We'll do another episode.
All right. Talk to you later, everybody. Have a great day.
ya.
Mike, John, thanks.
Hey,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Adios.
Guys.